Episode 87, September the 24th to the 25th, 1915. With the Guns at Loos by F.O.O, Major C.J.C. Street. Read by Christopher Weeks. The initials F.O.O stand for Forward Observation Officer of the Artillery, and in this instance disguise the identity of a famous detective writer, Mr. John Rhode, which is the nom de plume of Major C.J.C. Street. The Forward Observation Officer held a position of great danger and responsibility, and the author here tells the story of the preliminary bombardment before the Battle of Loos. Every reader must be impressed by the vivid account with which he gives of the urgency of the task of the gunners on the eve of this disastrous battle. That night, September the 24th, 1915, was the lull before the storm. All along our line, the restless field guns woke but fitfully, as a watchdog to bark at the moon, and then fell off to sleep again. Even the incomparable French 75 on our right, whose voices are hushed neither by day nor by night, seemed restless, impatient, restrained, keeping long silences, until in sheer desperation they burst into uncontrollable passion, ceasing again as suddenly as they had begun, as though appalled by their own act. Only the vivid light soared brilliantly as ever above the trenches, failing, however, to evoke the usual salutation from their unsleeping wardens. So the morning dawned, unheralded by the noisy morning hate with which the opposing armies invariably greeted one another. The still air seemed to cower silently, awaiting the shocks that were to come. So as the day passes on, we fall into our usual routine. The battery is seemingly uninhabited, but for the strident section commanders standing between their hidden guns, except when reliefs descended into the pits, as into avenues, of which presently appear a knot of men, dusty, grimy, and incredibly thirsty. All the time, at regular intervals, the guns fire, and the orders pass. Sometimes a keener note is heard. Left section, cease loading. Fresh target. A new string of orders, soon followed by a resumption of the periodic roaring, as of a thunderstorm controlled by an angel with a stopwatch. Or perhaps, fire number 3 gun. And no instant report. What's the matter, number 3? Misfire, sir. All right, look sharp. All ready, sir. Fire number 3, then. And the rhythm commences again. After a time, it all has a strangely soothing effect on the senses. First, one loses the din of the surrounding batteries, then fails to notice the report of one's own guns a few feet away, giving orders mechanically notwithstanding. Perhaps a stifled yawn and a glance at the watch. Is that infernal fellow never coming to relieve me? Then the warning voice of the telephonist. Fresh target coming through, sir. And the wandering attention leaps into watchfulness again. Up at the observation post, things are very different. There the observing officer sits, watching the black and yellow smoke clouds of the bursting high explosive, or the cotton wool-like puffs of the shrapnel. Number 1 fired, sir. The words of the telephonist seem to come as from some other world. Here she comes, far away behind, the whistle of the shell shrieking louder as she passes right overhead. Splendid. In the very trench itself, see the black smoke spread out and rise slowly from a long section of the trench, while the green vegetation grows white with the falling chalk. No correction could be made to that. Number 1, repeat. Number 2, fired, sir. Here she comes. Ah, a little to the right. Number 2, 10 minutes more left. Fire! So it goes on, until this particular section of the trench has practically disappeared, leaving only a white scar, then a change of target, and a repetition of the destruction. A fascinating business this on so fine an autumn day, so fascinating that all sense of time is lost. All conjecture as to whether the enemy will take it into his head to select our observation post as a target is forgotten. The only thing in the world is the measured fall of the shell and the swift framing of the subsequent order. The only pleasure, the deep satisfaction of a well-placed round. The only despair, the haunting memory of a shot wasted that might have been saved by a different procedure. During these 4 days of ceaseless bombardment, the enemy made very little reply except at certain points. We subsequently discovered why. He made no attempt to distribute his fire along our front line, nor did he make a systematic search for our observation posts, the vital organ of every battery and its most vulnerable one. Certain spots he selected, and with magnificent gunnery rendered them utterly untenable. Shell after shell fired with mathematical accuracy into Vermelles, Le Rotoir, Quality Street. But when once we had learned these favoured spots, our casualties were very few, being avoided by the simple expedient of removing to places that appeared to be more suitable in the capacity of health resorts, or where that was impossible, taking to the cellars and remaining there. The immaterial effect of such a bombardment is harder to judge, for it must be remembered that despite the high science of modern gunnery, the percentage of direct hits upon a given objective is still comparatively small. When, however, a heavy shell detonates under favourable conditions, its destructive power is enormous. For instance, on the 3rd day, I saw a direct hit by one of our largest howitzers upon the boiler house of Ch14. The shell penetrated the roof and burst inside the building, sending up an enormous cloud of black tinged smoke with the pink pulverized brick that hung for several minutes. When it cleared, nothing but a gaunt and twisted framework of steel girders remained, a heap of rubbish alone showing where the walls had once stood. A smaller howitzer was ordered to fell a brick wall, some 30 feet high and many courses thick. The shell burst a regular sequence at its foot, at roughly 10 yards intervals, each round bringing down an equivalent section of the wall, until nothing remained but a long pile of smoking rubble. And more impressive, perhaps, than all this is the sight of a medium Luddite shell bursting into a narrow trench. Out of the centre of a vivid flash fly heavy timbers, sandbags, revetments, all that once formed the trench, sometimes the mangled fragments of its occupants, while to the right and left rolls the choking smoke, driving its way into the deepest dugouts, overcoming men many yards away from the point of impact, spreading death in every form. Is it to be wondered that when our infantry reached these trenches, they found a few survivors, living indeed still, but struggling and raving as the inmates of some bedlam? During the night of September the 24th, 25th, infantry patrols left the trenches to explore the conditions of the enemy's wire entanglements, upon the destruction of which our field batteries had been engaged during the previous day. Artillery fire was therefore reduced as much as could be done with safety, and was chiefly directed upon reserves and billets in order to reduce the chance of rounds falling short, injuring the patrols. During the evening, the batteries opposed to us had shown far greater liveliness than they had hitherto. Possibly the enemy had got information as to where the decisive attack was to be made, as it seems to be the fact that owing to the 4 days' bombardment having taken place along the whole of the British front, they had hitherto hesitated to reinforce any particular sector, but had kept their reserves in a state of immediate readiness at their various railway centres. If this was the case, it is very probable that during the 23rd and 24th, fresh batteries were placed in position between Verdun, Leville, and Lens, and that these came into action on the afternoon and evening of the 24th. This supposition is borne out by the fact that the enemy's ability to bring a terrific fire to bear on Loos as soon as we entered it. Until the light failed, we had been busily engaging dropping shell along the double cressier, upon whose grim black crest the enemy was suspected of having mounted a number of machine guns. I had been in the observation post nearly the whole day. It is, by the way, worthy of remark as showing the immunity from retaliation that we had enjoyed in our sector, that we used to walk to and from the observation post at all hours of the day through country literally covered with batteries, none of whom, up until now, had suffered any casualties. But at about 7 o'clock, duty recalled me to the battery. So absorbed had I been in the difficult business of observing in the failing light, that although I was conscious that shells were bursting all around, I had no idea that anything out of the ordinary was taking place until one of our telephonists, who had been out repairing the line, returned somewhat shaken, having been blown off his feet and thrown some distance by a high explosive detonating close to him. His only complaint was that he'd lost his pair of wire cutters. However, as soon as I started my walk homewards along the Harrow Road, I found things still fairly lively. Several houses had been destroyed since the morning, and some very fine examples of shell holes in the middle of the road added to the joys of the transport drivers, whose wagons of all descriptions were now beginning to pour along it. At one point, a medium shell burst about 20 yards from me. I had heard it coming and found friendly refuge in the ditch. But before the smoke had fairly cleared, an armoured car and a motorcyclist orderly drove simultaneously into it from opposite directions. Nobody was hurt, but the road was most effectively obstructed, and the effect produced was exactly like that of a block in Piccadilly, including the language. I reached the battery safely to find that the shelling had not reached so far back, but that another form of excitement had supervened. We'd received orders to be ready to move at the shortest possible notice in case a general advance upon the morrow should render a change to our position necessary. Of course, we'd been prepared for this for days. But even so, this official pronouncement of our hopes sent a thrill through every one of us. This was then the decisive struggle, the Waterloo of the campaign at last. Moving a battery of heavy guns is, however, no small matter, and that one involves a vast amount of labour not to be lightly undertaken. A story is told of a certain major, distinguished alike for his capability and his piety, who, knowing from bitter experience the difficulties that attended a change of position of his battery, added on this night to his usual formula of prayer these heartfelt words: "O Lord, grant us victory in the coming struggle, but not in my sector." I think that despite the fact that the guns were silent for the first time since the beginning of the bombardment, very few of us slept much that night. Our schemes were perfect. Certainly, every detail of our actions of the morrow had been long worked out, each phase starting a definite time after an empiric zero, which was now fixed for 5:50 a.m. But would the enemy consent to fall in with those schemes? Suppose they anticipated our offensive by an attack of their own. The wire in front of their trenches was already destroyed. Even now our infantry were busy cutting wide passages through our own. How strong were they in reality? Was their passive endurance of our fire only a blind to lull us into security? These and 1,000 other conjectures troubled our minds all night, and it was with a deep feeling of relief that we stood in the battery, no untoward incident having marred our plans. At 5:30 a.m. on the 25th, the eagerly awaited Day Z. Then were the scenes at the opening of the bombardment repeated. All along our line was again quiet. Only from our right came the distant echoes of the fighting round Suchez and the labyrinth, a deep roar that had now been continuous for over a week. Again we sit in the telephone dugout, tense and expectant. Official time coming, sir. Watches are taken out in readiness. 5:35 now. Quarter of an hour to go. One by one we creep out to see for the last time that all is ready. 1 minute more. Hook your lanyards. The hand ticks round. Time 0. Fire! This was no deliberate bombardment. Every gun must, in the short interval allowed it, work to its utmost capacity. Every man sweating in the dust-laden pits must toil as he never toiled before to feed it. Into the luckless trenches in front of us must pour such a blasting hurricane of fire that the resistance prepared for our attack shall wither away in its deadly breath. But soon our own troops will be pouring out of their trenches, charging over the dividing ground to hurl themselves upon the trenches into which our wrath is now being poured. And then our fire must be lifted, lest we do more harm than good. All is arranged for in the timetable. At 40 minutes past 0, or 6:30 a.m., every battery lifts its fire from the front line to the second line, and still the furious fire continues. But now we know that the blow is being struck. What would we all not give to be in action in the open as in the old days, so that we could see the assault, watch the joining of the battle? And then suddenly came time 0, bringing with it a scene that could never be forgotten. From the whole length of our front trenches, as far as the eye could reach, rose, vertically at first, a grey cloud of smoke and gas that, impelled by a gentle wind, spread slowly towards the enemy's trenches, very soon enveloping the whole of our range of vision in its opaque veil. This was our view of the assault. This dismal vapour, the aura that was to surround 1,000 sacrifices, the cloak that was to hide 1,000 gallant deeds, the winding sheet that was to enwrap so many a hero. Modern war holds no dramatic spectacles, yet none the less is its fascination omnipotent. Its magnetic attraction that draws into its vortex every man that owns a soul to plague him is none the less irresistible. Its influence still has the power to weld a chain of heroes out of a dirty, blasphemous, footsore crowd of sinners.
I go, don't cry, don't sigh. There's a silver lining in the sky. Bonsoir, old thing, cheerio, chin-chin. Now toodle-oo, goodbye. Brother Bertie went away to do his bit the other day. With a smile on his lips and his lieutenant lips upon his shoulder, bright and gay. As the train moved out, he said, remember me to all the birds, though he wagged his paw and went away to war, shouting out these pathetic words. Goodbye, goodbye, when the tear may begin from your eye. Oh, it's hard to part, I know. I'll be tickled to death, I go, don't cry.